What's your life without me?
Let's find out.
Another year goes by, another season of everyone's favourite love-hate show, Rick and Morty. Today we shall be looking at the complete 7th season of the show, discussing all the episodes that are included. You know the usual stuff by now. We have 10 episodes included on a single disc Blu-ray Steelbook set, and this is the first season where co-creator Justin Roiland has not been involved in the show at all, and new voice actors are now portraying the title characters. The big question, has the show actually improved? I still think there's a mixed bag of good and bad episodes. I will praise the series when the content is genuinely good, and I will say there are several episodes from this run that were incredible in my eyes. However, there's still some episodes that are seriously lacking, and you know an episode is bad where you can't even bring yourself to finish it. Yes, there was one episode on this season that I actually couldn't bring myself to watch all the way through until the end. Between recording this video, I'm going to give it another try, but no promises. Here's a proper look at the Steelbook artwork, which I love the design, which is kind of reminiscent of the older seasons of the show, featuring a multitude of Rick and Morty variants. Nothing too interesting on the backing card. Rick and Morty 100 years, or at least until season 10. They seem to know their limits. Interesting how there's no mention of any bonus features on the back on here, which I find very strange, so I'll just list them on screen for you folks. And similar to previous seasons, there are 10 inside the episode featurettes, which is usually released onto YouTube anyway after an episode has already aired, giving you a minute kind of deep dive into what went into a certain episode. Speaking of certain episodes, we have directing Mort Ragnar, an essential episode for this run, where Rick finally goes up against Rick Prime, the new-ish antagonist in recent seasons. For sure, a standout episode that felt very much like a finale, but we got it 5 episodes in. Very surprised by that. The characters of Season 7 is a feature I'm very intrigued by. There's definitely been some unique faces spread throughout the 7th season, but also some familiar ones. And finally we have the obligatory Inside Season 7, giving us a generalised look at the season overall, and I'd be curious if Roiland will be mentioned in any of these features. Here's a look at the inside artwork with all the various Ricks and Mortys amongst other minor characters, and sadly, as it seems common with the UK Steelbook releases, we only get plain blue discs, which is kind of disappointing, but anyway, let's delve into the 10 episodes and discuss them in further detail. Most seasons of Rick and Morty do have a strong opening episode, often continuing from where we last left these characters, but this one felt very out of place for a season premiere. How Poopy got his poop back feels like an unnecessary filler episode, but it isn't really a bad one. It's definitely more of a character piece, trying to bring the gang back together, as though people watch this show to see these characters interact like a soap opera. And I do find it funny how the neighbour, Gene, is becoming a more prominent character who basically adds nothing of any consequence. But the episode premise is straightforward. Mr. Poopy Butthole is brought back as more than a cameo, and he's struggling with the aftermath of his family leaving him, and so we witness a messy night out, trying to lift his spirits. And there's some fun visuals to appreciate, like the gang getting drunk in the back of a cement mixer. I thought that was quite inventive. Hugh Jackman is a random guest star playing himself, which I genuinely thought was going to be an impersonation, but no, it was actually him. And we also get a name reveal for Mr. Poopy Butthole. Turns out his first name is Wayne. Not a strong start to the season, but overall a fairly innocent episode. Some of the show's best moments see Rick and Jerry together, which is fun, putting your main character with the metaphorical punching bag. Not always metaphorical. But the Jerick trap takes things to a whole new level, literally combining Rick and Jerry into one singular entity by the end. And their bickering and arguments are really well written, and I will say Chris Parnell has incredible chemistry with Ian Cardoni, who is now voicing Rick. And plot-wise, Rick and Jerry's argument turns pretty dark. They swap minds only to kill themselves, unable to handle being inside one another, not in that way. And the AI in the garage puts them back together, but in an unusual combination where their best attributes are combined, and they ironically become their best selves, learning to understand one another. And I do hope to see more Rick and Jerry episodes in the future, and this was one that I did actually have quite a lot of fun with. I wasn't a massive fan of the next episode, but I can appreciate what the writers were maybe trying to achieve. Air Force Wong sees Rick combine his personal life with his work life, if you can even call it that, where the US president gives him another mission, but interrupts Rick's therapy session where he meets Dr. Wong. And I like how she has become a consistent character from the Pickle Rick episode back in Season 3, and this time the president attempts to date Dr. Wong. And I can understand how this would make Rick feel perhaps more uncomfortable, where he's threatened about two parts of his life colliding. And I would like to think he would prefer to keep these elements of his life separate, and it's oddly relatable in that sense. And in a random twist, bringing back an underappreciated character in my opinion, Rick's ex-lover from Season 2, Unity, tries to grab his attention, and in doing so she assimilates the entire state of Virginia, because hearing about his revenge plan to hunt down and kill Rick Prime, she has an issue with this and is fearful for Rick's life. And I do like how Rick does have people around him that do care and cherish him, regardless as to whether or not he actually acknowledges that these people exist. I quite like how the episode is structured, inevitably setting up future events, but it's nothing special, and as a standalone piece, it doesn't really give off much as far as this episode is concerned. It's very predictable, setting up emotional character moments with no real payoff. This next one might honestly be one of the most absurd episodes of Rick and Morty, and I honestly think it's one of the best in a very long time. That's a Morty is a very inventive but extremely silly episode with an ethical debate I never thought I'd have to even think about. Rick treats the Smith family to spaghetti night, and it's the most delicious spaghetti ever, but where does it come from?
What's the secret ingredient? God, no, why? No, why is it always this shit with you? Of course it's a person!
That's right, Morty learns the secret, where the spaghetti is formed from the guts of suicide victims from another humanoid planet. Already this is pretty crazy, but Morty's interference trying to somehow make ethical changes to this only makes things worse, where people's lives are cut short for the sake of manufacturing more spaghetti, and it's hilarious to see Morty's face on the logo of spaghetti companies on this humanoid world. And I also really liked the deliberately emotional end sequence where a man voluntarily kills himself just to show the complexity of humanity. His life flashes before his eyes, which everybody sees, adding the perspective that these people are victims of greed being turned into spaghetti. And the end song was also incredible, with Katomi lending her vocals to the show once again. Overall, a solid episode, if somewhat existential. What felt more like a season finale was bizarrely given to us halfway through this run, being Mort Ragnar. This is it, the final confrontation between Rick and his nemesis Rick Prime, the man who killed his wife Diane and started this whole interdimensional feud. Overall, despite the episode's simplicity, this is a really unique character deconstruction. It begins with a flashback showing how Evil Morty originated, which I did not expect at all. We see his rise to power over the Citadel of Ricks and his current life outside of the Central Finite Curve. That is until he's drawn back into the madness of Rick and Morty, where their actions disrupt his peace outside of the curve. Oddly, Evil Morty does help Rick, only to be swept into the adventure where C-137 finally faces off against Rick Prime, and the fight scenes have some of the most ludicrous levels of detail, which adds a lot to the inevitable conclusion, and I really like how without Evil Morty, none of this would have been possible. Plus, seeing Rick Prime finally beaten, and then literally beaten, to death was extremely satisfying. I genuinely did wonder just how far this episode was going to push things, and Rick's moral dilemma is being handed the opportunity to do what feels right to him, and seek revenge, but at the cost of allowing Evil Morty to ascend into the true overarching villain of the show. And whilst distracted, killing Rick Prime, he steals the plans for an Omega device that Prime had built, which he keeps as a form of insurance. If he has the power to use a weapon capable of decimating Rick C-137, he'll be left alone for good, which is all he's ever wanted. And with the pattern that this show seems to have, where Evil Morty has emerged on all the odd number of seasons, I guess see you in Season 9, Evil Morty? The ending shot was a fun callback to Rick Potion 9 as well, with Rick staring off into the distance, now wondering what his life's purpose is without revenge motivating him. Overall, one hell of an episode, quite the game changer, which I'm hopeful will set up more lore episodes in the near future. The latter end of this season, for the most part, is honestly very forgettable in my opinion, Rick fending your Mort being one that felt like an attempt at hybridizing Interdimensional Cable and Morty's Mind Blowers becoming a clip show within a clip show. And I like the creativity in these episodes, but a lot of that in the past has stemmed from the more organic and unscripted recordings, which Justin Roiland was mainly known for doing. And this time, it just felt so forced for the sake of introducing these observer aliens that are deliberately annoying. And some of the clips did make me laugh. For example, the Rick and Morty that did the very awkward cameo in Space Jam 2 are now canonically dead.
I did it, Morty! I killed the versions of us that were in Space Jam! Help me with the bodies!
Wow!
Otherwise, I didn't really care for this episode, but it works to try and remove Rick from his depressive state, because he seemingly has no purpose in life after defeating his mortal enemy. Next up we have an estranged Total Recall homage with Wet Quata Mortican Summer, and with this story I like how there's a deliberate fixation on the sibling rivalry between Summer and Morty. She still views her younger brother as the typical annoying sibling, and a lot of their conflicts boil down to fighting for Rick's approval usually, but this time messing with a gadget known as an attribute slider, the siblings attend a party and fight over this device, only to become a combined being referred to as a Quato. And following Summer we see how this circumstance leads to danger, giving off some real Taken vibes where Rick has to save both of his grandchildren. Well, here it is, the episode I didn't watch until making this review, Rise of the Numbercons, the movie. Well, I suffered through it, genuinely the worst episode of the entire series, poorly written, horrendous dialogue. There was one joke that genuinely made me smile about the characters telling a story to lowercase letters at bedtime, but they had to ruin it by dragging out an explanation for the joke needlessly. This isn't fourth wall breaking humour, it's a cry for help. And speaking of, Morty and his math teacher Mr. Goldenfold joined forces with rap artist Ice-T, now Water T from the Get Swifty episode, to fight an invading army of numbers. Rick's not even in this episode, it's just a complete waste of animation, just a fucking awful episode at that, and one that I will probably never revisit. Getting back on form, we have Mort Ragnar, and this was an okay episode, seeing Rick deliberately murder Jerry over and over to experiment with the concept of an afterlife, and he finds that there is some form of heaven with an unlimited power source which he could potentially harness for his own usage. And this escalates into a vicious circle where Rick, Morty, and Bigfoot of all creatures are locked in a fight against the Pope. And this is an interesting departure from anything lore related. Plus, I did enjoy the elements of Viking mythology added to the story, along with the hilarious mind-switching moments between the characters. Despite a very rocky season, a complete mixed bag for me generally, I will say the season finale really impressed me. Fear No More felt like a classic episode of the show. It's witty, creepy, and further extends the lore revolving around Rick and his deceased wife Diane. And exploring a carnival, Rick and Morty are targeted by a creepy guy in a suit who promises to deliver a wild ride. And so he takes them to a Denny's restaurant where the bathroom has what's colloquially referred to as a fear hole, and by jumping in the hole it manifests your greatest fear, and once you conquer it you exit the hole a changed person. And I love this concept already, but it's how the episode tries to deceive you that hooks you into the story. Did Rick and Morty actually jump in the hole? Did only one of them jump in the hole? Or are they still in the hole? Well, apparently they never left the hole. As the episode progresses, things get a hell of a lot more creepy, and particularly it cements Morty's importance to Rick, especially now that Rick Prime is dead and he'll seemingly never get Diane back anyway. And so, with that in mind, it shows just how important the relationship between Rick and his grandson Morty really is. I also really enjoyed the carnival guy. He was a fantastic side character, very well written to be an ominous figure, but wasn't an actual threat to anybody, and the end scene was fantastic, and I really do hope to see more episodes like this in the near future. That's going to do it for my review discussing Season 7 of Rick and Morty whilst taking a look at the Blu-ray Steelbook sets. Sometimes I feel like I may be too harsh on this show, but then I recall episodes like the Numbercons. The only regret I have is that I watched that episode. Oh boy, but these past couple of seasons, for me at least, seem to have an odd trend where literally it's a 50-50 split of episodes that I like and episodes that I just didn't really care about all that much. I'm intrigued to see where Season 8 goes now that Rick Prime is dead, but it'll be 2025 when we next hear more about this show. Anyway, leave me a like if you enjoyed this review, drop me a comment, what are your thoughts on the show at the moment, do you have a favourite episode from this season? As ever, I love hearing your thoughts and opinions, and for more content be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, DVD Review Studios.
Are you threatening me?